13, 14. 135. 21. In addition, Jerusalem was the location where the kings of the Davidic line sat on Jehovah's throne, representing him by administering his laws. 1 ch. 29. 23. In contrast, ancient Babylon was the center from which false worship spread to all parts of the earth. It was of special significance, therefore, when Jehovah permitted Babylon to destroy unfaithful Jerusalem. In 620 BCE Jerusalem was made a subject to Babylon. 2 Chi 24. 3 years later, in 617 BCE the Babylonians deported many of Jerusalem's inhabitants, its nobility, its mighty men, and its craftsmen, and looted the city's treasures. 2 ch. 36. 5-10. Finally, the city, along with the temple, was destroyed and thousands of Jews were taken into exile. 2 ch. 36. 17-20. Jerusalem's destruction took place in 607 BCE, a very significant year from the standpoint of Bible prophecy. Although this date differs from the one used by many Bible commentators, it is used consistently in this publication. Why? Because we give greater weight to the testimony of the Bible than to the conclusions that scholars have drawn from the fragmentary record of history that is available on cuneiform tablets. Jerusalem's conquest by Babylon. Babylonian chronicle that tells of Nebuchadnezzar's capturing Jerusalem, seizing the king, and appointing one of his own choice. 617 BCE. According to some archaeologists, this burnt room excavated in Jerusalem dates back to the destruction of Jerusalem at the time of Judah's last king 326. The Medes and the Persians are referred to repeatedly in the scriptures, because they pursued a policy of religious toleration that served to fulfill Bible prophecy. Jehovah had permitted the Jews to be taken into captivity by Babylon, a nation that did not release captive peoples. Yet, God also had foretold Jewish restoration to their homeland. J 27. 22. 30. 3. Medo-Persia, referred to in the Bible symbolically as Obed 7. 5, served Jehovah's purpose in this regard. Shortly after Babylon's fall, Persian King Cyrus decreed that the formerly captive Jews could return to their homeland and rebuild Jehovah's temple. As 1. 2-4 Darasi later honored this decree. As 6. 1-11 King Ahasuerus, evidently Xerxes I, when properly informed, signed a decree that thwarted a scheme to exterminate the Jews. As 7. 3. 8. 14. In 455 BCE King Artaxerxes Longimanus granted permission for Nehemiah to rebuild Jerusalem's walls, thus beginning the prophetic countdown to the appearance of the Messiah. Ne 2. 3-8. Dar 9. 25. The Persian Empire. Principal locations: Pasargadae, an early Persian capital; Shushan, former Elamite capital that became administrative center of the Medo-Persian Empire; Persepolis, a royal city built by Emperors Darasi, Xerxes I, and Artaxerxes Longimanus; Ecbatana, summer capital of the empire. It has been the capital of Media Babylon, a royal city of the empire. Because of the torrid summer weather, the city seldom served as more than a winter capital. Gorgamila, site of the defeat of Persia's vast army under Darius III by Alexander the Great in 331 BCE, thus marking the end of the empire. 327 BLAC Essia MCEDO Annihilai Diagray at Essia ASSYI Gorgamila TGRISRIVER Upar TESRIVER Babylon SYI Damascus Jerusalem ME Diakbatana PRTHI Elam Shushan Pasarkadae PRSI Persepolis PRZN GULF in DI and DUS Rivier in Dia NOCEA in Egypt Memphis Thebes in Isla River at Sea Ethiopia. Relief work showing Medes with round hats and Persians with fluted hats. Modern Hamadan in Iran, the site of ancient Ecbatana. Here Cyrus the Great had a palace. His policy of religious toleration greatly benefited the Jews. The Cyrus cylinder, a 9-inch long 23 centimeters clay document that records Cyrus' capture of Babylon and the liberation of Exel's cylinder seal of Darasi and its impression, showing him on a lion hunt and his god Arimazda in the sky above. Darius upheld the Jews in their temple rebuilding work in Jerusalem. Ruins from ancient Persepolis. Here Darius I, Xerxes I, and Artaxerxes Longimanus built palaces. Excavations of ancient town area in Shushan, decorations typical of those that adorned the palace audience hall at Shushan, Mordecai and Esther before King Ahasuerus, evidently Xerxes I. In 607 BCE the once prosperous land of Judah was made a desolate waste, without an inhabitant, as Jewish captives were led away to exile in Babylon and a remnant fled to Egypt. 9. 11 The God of loving kindness, though, would not leave his people in exile forever. He foretold that they would have to serve the king of Babylon 70 years, after which he would deliver a faithful remnant. 25. 11, 12. 29. 10-14 And not even the seemingly impregnable world power of Babylon could thwart God's stated purpose. The return of the Jewish exiles demonstrates the unerring accuracy with which Jehovah's prophecies are fulfilled. Even before the end of the 70 years of exile, Babylon fell, in 539 BCE to the invading armies of Persian King Cyrus. Then, during his first year as ruler of Babylon, Cyrus issued a decree opening the way for the Jewish exiles to return to Jerusalem. As 1-4 a remnant that numbered 42-360 including men, women, and children made the journey, arriving in Judah in 537 BCE as 5, 3, 4. Thus the 70 years desolation ended exactly on time. Not all the exiles returned at that time, however. In 468 BCE another group of returnees accompanied the priest Ezra, who brought to Jerusalem gifts for the temple. Ez 7. 8. 32 Then in 455 BCE Nehemiah traveled from Shushan to rebuild Jerusalem's walls. Ne 2. 5, 6, 11 As to the exact route followed by the returnees, the scriptures are silent. Some reasonable possibilities are shown on the map. Exiles return from Babylon Cyrus Cylinder, which states the policy of Cyrus to return captives to their homelands and to aid in restoration of their temples. 332 possible routes of returning exiles. Roadways Persian Galef Shushan Babylon Tigrisrivereuphr Tadmor Damascus Jerusalem Temagiriatse. Amazing events in Greek history have fulfilled Bible prophecy. Greece seemed an unlikely candidate for world power, as its people were divided into independent tribes and city-states. But Bible prophecy recorded in the 6th century BCE pointed to a dramatic change. Symbolizing Greece first as a leopard with wings and then as a he-goat with a conspicuous horn, it foretold in an unmistakable way that Greece would trample down the Medo-Persian world power. It also disclosed that the power of a conspicuous horn would be broken and that 4 others would come up instead of it. Jar 7. 6. 8. 5-8, 20-22. 11. 3, 4. Alexander the Great proved to be that conspicuous horn. Beginning in 334 BCE he led a small, but well-disciplined Greek army to one victory after another. With lightning speed he conquered Asia Minor, Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and the entire Medo-Persian Empire as far as India. But in just a few years Alexander was dead, and in a relatively short time his empire was split 4 ways, among 4 of his generals. The Grecian Empire was short-lived, but its effects were long-lasting. Before his death, Alexander had introduced Greek culture and the Greek language into all parts of his domain. Common Greek became the lingua franca of many nationalities, and this later contributed to the rapid spread of Christianity throughout the Mediterranean area. Grecian Empire Athens, with the site of the ancient Agora in the foreground and the Acropolis in the background on the right. Even after Greece ceased to be a world power, Athens remained an international cultural center. 333. In 323 BCE at 32 years of age, Alexander was stricken by malarial fever and died. By 301 BCE 4 of his generals had established themselves in power. Ptolemy Lagus over Egypt and Palestine. Seleucus Nicator over Mesopotamia and Syria. Lysimachus over Thrace and Asia Minor. And Cassander over Macedonia and Greece. 7. 6. 8. 11. 4 Conquests of Alexander Root followed Aral Cblakasika Espia and Essia Pelagranicus Riversadas Isis Tyre Gaeta Alexandria Memphis Niliarivia Aretsi Jerusalem Damascus Tgrisrivia Iabara Tsrivia Gorgamala Babylon Shushan Persepolis Ecbatana Taxila Alexandria Esade Ndus Rivi Erin Dia Nocea Npec and Gulfcia Ssa Ndia Pelalizimakia Blck Essia Lizimacus Gaetsia Lucas Nicatra Antosh Seleucia Persia Ngulf Ptolemy Lugus Alexandria Edsia. Greek games, such as these shown on a relief found in Athens, were associated with Greek religion and promoted Hellenism. A gymnasium established in Jerusalem thus corrupted Jewish youths, a ceramic platter showing a pig being sacrificed. In a vicious attempt to defile and to stamp out the worship of Jehovah, Antiochus IV Epiphanes made such a sacrifice on an altar built over the large one in Jehovah's temple in Jerusalem, and then dedicated the temple to Zeus, coin bearing the likeness of Antiochus IV Epiphanes. Ancient Corinth. Christians in the 1st century congregation here had to contend with the influence of Greek philosophy and the morally corrupting practices of its religion. The philosopher Plato, of the 4th century BCE, did much to propagate the Greek notion of immortality of the soul. The Alexandrine manuscript, in Greek, of the 5th century CE. Most of the Christian Greek scriptures was originally written in Koine, the common Greek. Mark, Good News according to 337. Mark, Good News according to the divinely inspired record of the ministry of Jesus Christ written by John Mark. This account of the good news about Jesus Christ begins with the work of Christ's forerunner, John the Baptizer, and concludes with a report of the circumstances surrounding Jesus' resurrection. Hence, it covers the time from the spring of 29 to the spring of 33 CE. Mr. 1. This Gospel, the shortest of all 4, is a rapid, moving and descriptive record of the ministry of Jesus Christ as the miracle-working Son of God. Frequent is the use of immediately or at once. Mr. 1. 10, 12, 18, 21, 29. The account is almost evenly divided between conversation and action. Source of information. Ancient tradition indicates that Peter provided the basic information for Mark's Gospel, and it would agree with the fact that Mark was associated with Peter in Babylon. 1 Pe 5. 13. According to Origen, Mark composed his Gospel in accordance with Peter's instructions. The Ecclesiastical History, Eusebius, 6, XXV, 3-7. In his work, Against Marcion IV, Tertullian says that the Gospel of Mark may be affirmed to be Peter's, whose interpreter Mark was. The Ante-Nicene Fathers, Volume 3, p. 350. Eusebius gives the statement of John the Presbyter as quoted by Papias c. 140 CE. And the presbyter used to say this: Mark became Peter's interpreter and wrote accurately all that he remembered, not, indeed, in order, of the things said or done by the Lord. Mark did nothing wrong in thus writing down single points as he remembered them. For to one thing he gave attention, to leave out nothing of what he had heard and to make no false statements in them. The Ecclesiastical History, 3, XXXIX, 12-16. John Mark evidently also had other sources of information. Since Jesus' early disciples met in the home of his mother, Act 12. Mark must have been acquainted with persons other than Peter who had known Jesus Christ well, individuals who had seen him doing his work and had heard him preach and teach. Probably being the certain young man whom those arresting Christ tried to seize, but who got away naked, Mark himself was apparently not totally without personal contact with Jesus. Mr. 14. 51, 52. Evidently written with non-Jews in mind. While the Good News according to Mark would interest and benefit Jewish readers, apparently it was not written specifically for them. It seems to have been composed primarily for non-Jewish readers, especially the Romans. Its conciseness and abrupt character have been viewed as particularly suitable for the intellect of Roman readers. Latin terms are sometimes transliterated into Greek, as when the Greek word (on) is used for the Latin term praetorium. Mr. 15. 16. And also, the Greek word (rian) is employed for the Latin word centurio, an officer in command of 100 soldiers. Mr. 15. 39. Int. The account contains explanations that would not have been necessary for Jewish readers. It indicates that the Jordan was a river and shows that the temple could be seen from the Mount of Olives, Mr. 1. 5. 13. 3. It mentions that the Pharisees practiced fasting, and that the Sadducees say there is no resurrection. 2. 18. 12. 18. This gospel also explains that the Passover victim was sacrificed on the first day of unfermented cakes, and that preparation was the day before the Sabbath. 14. 12. 15. 42. Whereas it would not normally have been necessary to explain Semitic terms for Jewish readers in general, Mark's Gospel provides many of such explanations. Interpretations are given for Boanerges sons of thunder, Talo Middle.Thakumi maiden, I say to you, get up. Korban a gift dedicated to God, and Eli, Eli, Lomasa Middle.Bakthinai. My God, why have you forsaken me? Mr. 3. 17. 5. 41. 7. 11. 15. 34. Time and place of composition. According to ancient tradition, Marxo textoi acute miritra longo, Marketplace 338 about the requirements for gaining everlasting life. 10. 21. Also unique with Mark's account are certain points regarding the end of Jesus' earthly life. He reports that at Jesus' trial the false witnesses were not in agreement. Mr. 14. 59. The passerby impressed into service to carry Jesus' torture stake was Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. 15. 21. And Mark relates that Pilate made sure that Jesus was dead before granting permission for Joseph of Arimathea to take the body for burial. 15. 43-45. One of the 4 illustrations of Jesus found in Mark's Gospel is unique. Mr. 4. 26-29. The account mentions at least 19 miracles performed by Jesus Christ. 2 of these, the healing of a deaf man who also had a speech impediment and the cure of a certain blind man, are contained only in Mark's Gospel. Mr. 7. 31-37. 8. 22-26. References to the Hebrew Scriptures. Although Mark appears to have written primarily for the Romans, this record does contain references to and quotations from the Hebrew Scriptures. The work of John the Baptist is shown to have been a fulfillment of Isaiah 40. 3 and Malachi 3. 1. Mr. 1. 2-4 also to be found in the account are instances of Jesus applying, quoting from, or alluding to the Hebrew Scriptures. These include giving God mere lip service, Mr. 7. 6, 7. Isla 29. 13. Honoring parents, Mr. 7. 10. X 20. 12. 21. 17. The creation of man and woman and the institution of marriage, Mr. 10. 6-9. G 1. 27. 2. 24. Various commandments, Mr. 10. 19. X 20. 12-16. 19. 13. Jesus' comments regarding the temple, Mr. 11. 17. Isla 56. 7. J 7. 11. His statement about being rejected, Mr. 12. 10, 11. PS 118. 22, 23. Jehovah's words to Moses at the burning thorn bush, Mr. 12. 26. X 3. 2, 6. The 2 great commandments on love, Mr. 12. 29-31. The 6. 4, 5. The 19. 18. The prophetic words of Jehovah to David's Lord on the subjugation of foes, Mr. 12. 36. PS 110. 1. The scattering of Jesus' disciples, Mr. 14. 27. Zech 13. 7. Jesus' statement on being forsaken by God, Mr. 15. 34. PS 22. 1. His instructions to a healed leper, Mr. 1. 44. The 14. 10, 11. and his prophetic statement regarding the disgusting thing causing desolation Mystic 13. 14. Dar 9. 27. The references to the Hebrew scriptures in Mark's account amply illustrate that Jesus Christ had confidence in them and used those scriptures in his ministry. The Gospel also provides a basis for becoming better acquainted with the Son of Man, who came, not to be ministered to, but to minister and to give his soul a ransom in exchange for many. Mr. 10. 45. Long and short conclusions. Some have thought that Mark 16. 8, which ends with the words "and they told nobody anything, for they were in fear," is too abrupt to have been the original ending of this Gospel. However, that need not be concluded in view of Mark's general style. Also, the 4th century scholars Jerome and Eusebius agree that the authentic record closes with the words "for they were in fear." Jerome, Letter 120, Question 3, as published in Corpus Scriptorum Ecclesiasticorum Latinorum, Vienna and Leipzig, 1912, Volume LV, p. 481. Eusebius, Ad Marinum, I, as published in Patrologia Graeca, Paris, 1857, Volume XXI, Col. 937. There are a number of manuscripts and versions that add a long or a short conclusion after these words. The long conclusion consisting of 12 verses is found in the Alexandrine manuscript, the Codex Ephraemi Syri Scriptus, and the Codex Bezae-Cantabrigensis. It also appears in the Latin Vulgate, the Curetonian Syriac, and the Syriac Peshitta. But it is omitted in the Sinaitic manuscript, the Vatican manuscript No. 1209, the Sinaitic Syriac Codex, and the Armenian version. Certain late manuscripts and versions contain the short conclusion. The Codex Regius of the 8th century CE has both conclusions, giving the shorter conclusion first. It prefixes a note to each conclusion, saying that these passages o textoi acute miritra longo. Marketplace 339 Pharisees wanted to be noticed by the throngs there and to be greeted in accord with their assumed high station. Mount 23. 2, 6, 7. Mr. 12. 38. Lu 11. 43. 20. 46. Upon returning from the market, the tradition-keeping Pharisees and other Jews cleansed themselves by sprinkling before ever eating anything. Mr. 7. 3, 4. While on earth, Christ Jesus healed persons in the marketplaces. Mr. 6. 56. And the Apostle Paul, at Athens, daily reasoned in the marketplace. Mark's concise, fast-moving account of Jesus' life, presenting Jesus as the miracle-working Son of God, the shortest gospel. It was the third to be written c. 60-65 CE. Evidently with non-Jews in mind, Jesus conducts a vigorous campaign of kingdom preaching. Jesus is baptized and begins preaching, "The kingdom of God has drawn near." 1. 9-11, 14, 15. He invites Simon, Andrew, James, and John to leave the fishing business and be his followers. 1. 16-21. After preaching in the synagogue at Capernaum, he proceeds to preach throughout the whole of Galilee. 1. 21, 22, 35-39. Levi, a tax collector, responds to invitation to be Jesus' follower. 2. 14-17. Jesus forms a group of 12 apostles to preach. 3. 13-19. He uses many illustrations when teaching about the kingdom of God so that only worthy ones get the full sense of what he says. 4. 1-34. Jesus encounters lack of faith while witnessing in his home territory. 6. 1-6. He steps up the preaching activity by sending out his apostles. 6. 7-13. His activity reaches into Phoenicia and the Decapolis. 7. 24-31. Jesus is transfigured in kingdom glory. 9. 1-8. Outside Jerusalem, he prophesies about the coming of the Son of Man with great power and glory. 13. 1-37. The miracle-working Son of God at the synagogue in Capernaum, he frees the man from demon possession. Afterward, he heals Simon's mother-in-law and cures many others of various afflictions. 1. 23-34, 40-42. By curing a paralytic, Jesus demonstrates his power to forgive sins. 2. 1-12. Sufferers crowd in from all parts seeking relief. 3. 1-12. After calming a storm in the Sea of Galilee, he expels demons from a man and allows them to enter a herd of swine. 4. 35. 5. 17. He heals a woman suffering from a flow of blood and resurrects Jairus' daughter. 5. 21-43. After feeding 5,000 with 2 fishes and 5 loaves, Jesus walks on the windswept Sea of Galilee. 6. 35-52. He casts a demon from the daughter of a Syrophoenician woman and cures a deaf man having a speech impediment. 7. 24-37. He feeds 4,000 with 7 loaves. At Bethsaida, he restores sight to a blind man. 8. 1-9. 22-26. From a speechless, deaf boy, Jesus expels a demon that had resisted the disciples. He restores sight to a blind beggar at Jericho. 9. 14-29. 10. 46-52. He curses a fig tree, which subsequently withers. 11. 12-14. 20. Opposers of God's Son are unsuccessful after Satan's efforts at temptation in the wilderness. Angels minister to Jesus. 1. 12-13. When scribes of the Pharisees criticize his eating with tax collectors and sinners, Jesus refutes them. 2. 15-17. Later the Pharisees object to his disciples plucking heads of grain on the Sabbath and Jesus healing on the Sabbath. They join the Herodians in wanting to destroy him. 2. 23. 3. 6. Jesus convincingly refutes the accusation that he expels demons by means of Satan. 3. 20-30. Jesus' foreigner John the Baptist is beheaded, but Jesus continues to teach. 6. 14-29. 34. Pharisees and scribes protest that his disciples disregard their tradition about hand-washing. Jesus exposes their hypocrisy and explains the real source of uncleanness. 7. 1-23. Pharisees question Jesus regarding divorce in order to test him, but without success. 10. 1-12. Chief priests, scribes, and older men challenge Jesus' authority after he cleanses the temple, but he silences o textoi acute miritra longo, Maroth 340 with those who happen to be on hand. Acts 17. 16, 17. See Appius, marketplace of Maroth Maroth from a root meaning be bitter. A town mentioned by the prophet Micah in his prophecy foretelling Jehovah's punishment of Jerusalem and Judah. Mic 1. 12. The location is undetermined. Some would identify it with Maraarath of Joshua 15. 59. Marriage. The union of a man and a woman as husband and wife according to the standard set out by God. Marriage is a divine institution, authorized and established by Jehovah in Eden. Marriage brings into being the family unit, the family circle. Its basic purpose was the reproducing of the members of the human family, to bring into existence more creatures of the human kind. Jehovah the Creator made male and female and ordained marriage as the proper arrangement for the multiplication of the human race. Ge 1. 27, 28. The first human wedding was performed by Jehovah, as described at Genesis 2. 22-24. Marriage was designed to form a permanent bond of union between man and woman, that they might be mutually helpful to each other. Living together in love and confidence, they could enjoy great happiness. Jehovah created woman as a mate for man by using the man's rib as a base, thereby making woman man's closest fleshly relative on earth, his own flesh. Ge 2. 21. As Jesus pointed out, it was not Adam but God who said, "That is why a man will leave his father and his mother and he must stick to his wife and they must become one flesh." The wording of this text makes it evident that monogamy was the original standard for marriage in the eyes of Jehovah God. Mount 19. 4-6. Ge 2. 24. Marriage was the normal way of life among the Hebrews. There is no word for bachelor in the Hebrew scriptures. The basic purpose of marriage being to have children, the statement of blessing by Rebekah's family is understandable. May you become thousands times 10,000 Ge 24. 60. Also Rachel's appeal to Jacob. Give me children or otherwise I shall be a dead woman. Ge 30. 1. Marriage was a matter affecting the family, and not only the family, but the entire tribe or patriarchal community, for it could have an effect on the strength of the tribe as well as its economy. It was natural and seemed necessary, therefore, that the selection of a wife and the arrangement of all contractual and financial matters connected with it should be decided upon by the parents or guardians involved, though the consent of the parties was sometimes sought. Ge 24. 8. And romantic attachments often accompanied the arrangements. GE 29. 20. 1 Sa 18. 20, 27, 28. The initial steps or proposals were generally made by the parents of the young man, but sometimes by the father of the girl, especially if there was a difference of rank. Jos 15. 16, 17. 1 Sa 18. 20-27. It seems to have been generally customary for a man to look for a wife within the circle of his own relations or tribe. This principle is indicated by Laban's statement to Jacob. It is better for me to give my daughter to you than for me to give her to another man. GE 29. 19. Especially was this observed among the worshippers of Jehovah, as exemplified by Abraham when he sent to his relatives in his own country to get a wife for his son Isaac rather than to take one from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom he was dwelling. GE 24. 3. For marriage by non-worshippers of Jehovah was frowned upon and strongly discouraged. It was a form of disloyalty. GE 26. 34, 35. Under the law, marriage alliances with persons of the 7 Canaanite nations were prohibited. De 7. 1-4. However, a soldier might marry a captive virgin from another foreign nation after she had undergone a purification period, during which she mourned her dead parents and got rid of all features of her past religious connections. De 21. 10-14. Bride price. Before the marriage contract was concluded, the young man or the father of the young Otextoi acute Miritra Longo, marriage 341 publicly made known, acknowledged, and recorded, and the marriage was binding. GE 24. 67. However, as soon as marriage arrangements had been made and the parties were engaged, they were considered bound in marriage. Lot's daughters were still in his house, under his jurisdiction, but the men engaged to them were termed Lot's sons-in-law who were to take his daughters. GE 19. 14. Although Samson never married a certain Philistine woman, but was only engaged to her, she was spoken of as his wife. JG 14. 10, 17, 20. The law stated that if an engaged girl committed fornication, she and the guilty man were to be put to death. If she was violated against her will, the man was to be put to death. However, any case involving an unengaged girl was handled differently. De 22. 22-27. Marriages were registered. Under the law, marriages, as well as births resulting from the union, were recorded in the official records of the community. For this reason we have an accurate genealogy of Jesus Christ. Mount 1. 1-16. Lu 3. 23-38. Compare Lu 2. 1-5. Celebration. While the wedding itself had no formal ceremony, there was, nevertheless, a very joyous celebration of weddings in Israel. On the day of the wedding, at her own home the bride usually made elaborate preparations. First she would bathe herself and rub herself with perfumed oil. Compare Lu 3. 3. As 23. 40. At times assisted by woman attendants, she put on breastbands and a white robe, often richly embroidered, according to her financial status. Ch 2. 32. Re 19. 7, 8. PS 45. 13, 14. She decked herself with ornaments and jewels, if she was able to do so. Isra 49. 18. 61. 10. Re 21. 2, and then covered herself with a light garment, a form of veil, that extended from head to foot. Isra 3. 19, 23. This explains why Laban could so easily practice a deception on Jacob so that Jacob did not know that Laban was giving him Leah instead of Rachel. GE 29. 23, 25. Rebekah put on a head covering when she approached to meet Isaac. GE 24. 65. This symbolized the subjection of the bride to the bridegroom, to his authority. 1 Co 11. 5, 10. The bridegroom was likewise arrayed in his best attire and often had a handsome headdress and a garland on his head. Ca 3. 11. Issa 61. 10. Escorted by his friends, he would leave his house in the evening for the home of the bride's parents. Mount 9. 15. From there the procession, accompanied by musicians and singers, and usually by persons bearing lamps, move toward the home of the bridegroom or to the house of his father. The people along the route would take great interest in the procession. The voices of the bride and bridegroom would be heard in exultation. Some, particularly maidens bearing lamps, would join the procession. Just 7. 34. 16. 9. Issa 62. 5. Mount 25. When the bridegroom might spend considerable time at his home and, then again, some delay might take place before the procession would leave the home of the bride, so that it would thus be quite late, and some who were waiting along the way might get drowsy and fall asleep, as in Jesus' illustration of the 10 virgins. The singing and exultation might be heard quite a distance ahead, those hearing it making the cry, "Here is the bridegroom." The attendants were ready to greet the bridegroom when he came, and those invited to the marriage supper would enter the house. After the bridegroom and his entourage had gone into the house and closed the door, it was too late for tardy guests to enter. Mount 25. 1-12. 22. 1-3. GE 29. 22. It was looked upon as a gross insult to decline the invitation to the marriage feast. Mount 22. The guests might be provided with robes. Mount 22. 11, and their respective places at the feast were often designated by the one extending the invitation. Lu 14. 8-10. Friend of the bridegroom. The friend of the bridegroom had a large share in the arrangements, and was looked upon as bringing together the bride and groom. The friend of Otextoi acute Muritra Longo, marriage 342 evidently also belonged to the man when he was engaged to a woman. New 30. 3-8, 10-15. The husband was the lord, master of the household, and was considered the owner heb. Baal of the woman. De 22. 22. Proverbs 31 describes some of the duties of the wife toward her husband, or owner, which included the household work, the making of and care for clothing, even some of the buying and selling, and general supervision of the household. The woman, while being in subjection and being in a sense the property of the husband, enjoyed a fine status and many privileges. Her husband was to love her, and this was true even if she was a secondary wife or one who has been taken as a captive. She was not to be mistreated and was guaranteed food, clothing, shelter, and the marriage due without diminution. Also, the husband could not constitute the son of the favorite wife as the firstborn at the expense of the son of the hated or less preferred wife. X 21. 7-11. De 21. 11, 14-17. Faithful Hebrew men loved their wives, and if the wife was wise and acted in harmony with God's law, often the husband would listen to her or approve of her actions. GE 21. 8-14. 27. 41-46. 28. 1-4. Even the unengaged virgin who was seduced by an unmarried man was protected, for if the father permitted, the seducer had to marry the girl and could never divorce her all his life. De 22. 28, 29. If the wife was formally accused by her husband of not being a virgin at the time of marriage and the charge was proved false, her husband was fined and could never divorce her. De 22. 17-19. A woman who was accused of secret adultery, if innocent, was then to be made pregnant by her husband so that she could bear a child and thereby give public notice of her innocence. The dignity of the wife person was respected. Intercourse with her during menstruation was forbidden. Law 18. 19. New 5. 12-28. Prohibited marriages. Besides prohibition of marriage alliances with non-worshippers of Jehovah, especially with the 7 nations in the land of Canaan. X 34. 14-16. De 7. 1-4. Other marriages were prohibited within certain degrees of consanguinity or affinity. Law 18. 6-17. A high priest was prohibited from marrying a widow, a divorced or violated woman, or a prostitute. He was to marry only a virgin from his people. Law 21. 10, 13, 14. The other priests could not marry a prostitute or violated woman, nor a woman divorced from her husband. Law 21. 1, 7 according to Ezekiel 44. 22. They could marry a virgin of the house of Israel or a widow who happened to be the widow of a priest. If a daughter inherited property, she was not to marry out of her tribe. This prevented a hereditary possession from circulating from tribe to tribe. New 36. 8, 9. Divorce. At the institution of marriage by the Creator, he made no provision for divorce. A man was to stick to his wife, and they must become one flesh. Ge 2. 24. A man would therefore have one wife who was considered one flesh with him. It was only after man's fall and consequent imperfections and degradation that divorce entered in. In giving the law to Israel, God did not at that time choose to enforce the original standard, but he regulated divorce so that it would not bring dissolution of the family arrangement in Israel or work undue hardship. However, at God's due time his original standard was restored. Jesus stated the principle governing the Christian congregation, that fornication gr. Poor middle.naya is the only valid ground for divorce. He explained that God did not enforce this standard through Moses out of regard for the hard-heartedness of the Israelites. Mount 19. 3-9. Mr. 10. 1-11. In the Christian congregation, therefore, aside from death, which automatically breaks the marriage tie, the only other way it may be broken is on the ground of fornication, which causes the offending one to become one flesh with an illicit partner. It therefore otex toi acute muritra longo, marriage 343 be a virgin at the time of their marriage. De 22. 13-19, 28, 29. After a divorce, if a woman married another man and this man later divorced her or died, the original husband could not marry her again. This worked to prevent any scheme to bring about a divorce from the second husband, or perhaps even his death, so the original couple might remarry. De 24. 1-4. Jehovah hated an unjust divorce, especially where a faithful worshipper of his was treacherously dealt with in order to arrange for another marriage to a pagan woman who was not a member of his chosen covenant people. Mao 2. 14-16. See divorce. Polygamy. Since God's original standard for mankind was for the husband and wife to become one flesh, polygamy was not intended, and it is prohibited in the Christian congregation. Overseers and ministerial servants, who are to set the example for the congregation, are to be men having not more than one living wife. 1 T 3. 2, 12. T 1. 5, 6. This is in harmony with what true marriage is used to picture, namely, the relationship of Jesus Christ and his congregation, the only wife possessed by Jesus. F5. 21-33. As was the case with divorce, polygamy, while not God's original arrangement, was tolerated until the time of the Christian congregation. Polygamy had a start not long after Adam's deflection. The first Bible mention of it is concerning a descendant of Cain, Lamech, of whom it says, he proceeded to take 2 wives for himself. Ge 4. 19. Concerning some of the angels, the Bible mentions that before the flood, the sons of the true God went taking wives for themselves, namely, all whom they chose. Ge 6. 2. Concubinage was practiced under patriarchal law and under the law covenant. A concubine had a legal status. Her position was not a matter of fornication or adultery. Under the law, if a man's firstborn son was the son of his concubine, this son would be the one to receive the firstborn's inheritance.